Hey there guys, and welcome back to the channel. As always, thanks so much for joining me in this episode of Review Flicks. I always appreciate you guys being here. So we're going to take a look at the opening weekend for Wicked and for Gladiator. So these two movies could not be more different, but I've seen one of them. I've seen Gladiator so far. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great movie. Obviously not as good as the first movie, but that's really hard to get a movie that's that impressive as that first Gladiator. And I'm hoping to see Wicked today, so I'm excited to see that, guys. But anyway, let's take a look at the box office opening weekends for both of these movies, because they're both kind of explosive movies in their own right, and they're both great. And I can't wait to see how much money they've generated this weekend. So this comes to us from comicbookmovie.com. Let's jump in, break down these details, and see what the opening weekends look like for both of these movies. So Wicked cast the spell on cinema goers with 165 million global opening, and Gladiator 2 set for 60 million domestic debut. So it looks like when it comes to these two movies, it looks like Wicked is way out in front, but I expected that with the being popular in the zeitgeist, the hype, the anticipation, the 4-quadrant movie type, you know, where you can take family, friends of all different ages, and Wicked, the musical as well, it's just worldwide popularity. So of course it was going to be Gladiator 2 at the box office. I think that was a foregone conclusion, at least in my mind anyway. But let's go down and let's jump into these details here. So, though the movie came in slightly under the initial 120 million domestic estimates, Universal's Wicked still looks set for a very impressive opening weekend at the worldwide box office. So, John M. Chu's adaptation of the hit Broadway musical took in 117 million from US theaters and 48 million overseas from global debut of $165 million. So, that's a pretty impressive opening weekend for Wicked, but will it have legs? Will it have good word of mouth? Will it spread? Will people come back and do repeat viewings? And ultimately, at the end of the day, when all is said and done, will it get to that elusive $1 billion club? There's only been 55 movies in cinematic history that have joined that elusive $1 billion club. I've been saying over the past few weeks, as I've been talking about this movie, that I think it's got around about an 80 to 85% chance of joining that $1 billion club. The hype, the anticipation that's built around this movie, and I think a lot of people will come back and do repeat viewings with friends, families, and I think large groups will come out in droves to see this movie. So I think there's a very good chance that it does get to that $1 billion mark. So this gives it the critically acclaimed feature, the biggest opening weekend for a film based on a Broadway show, ahead of Les Mis at 103, the 6th biggest opening weekend of 2024, and the 4th biggest global opening weekend ever for a musical, ahead of The Little Mermaid at 163.6 million. So let's go over those statistics again, because I think they're pretty important here. So this gives the critically acclaimed feature the biggest opening weekend for a film based on a Broadway show, ahead of Les Mis at 103, the 6th biggest opening weekend of 2024 worldwide, and the 4th biggest global opening weekend ever for a musical, ahead of The Little Mermaid, which came in at 163.6. So that's pretty impressive statistics across the board, but ultimately it's going to come down to whether it has legs, whether it can continue to bring in that box office revenue weekend after weekend. The drop-off from weekend 1 to weekend 2, we're going to have to wait and see how big that drop-off will be. If it's anything more than sort of like 60%, then it could be in trouble. Hopefully, if it sticks at around 60% drop or lower, then I think this movie will be in for a really good shout to making a lot of money in its second weekend. So, moving on to Gladiator 2 here. Ridley Scott's Gladiator 2 also opened on Friday. Glicked or Wikiator. So ever since that Barbenheimer craze, you know, with Barbie and Oppenheimer, people have tried to generate that same kind of hype with obviously with Gladiator here and Wicked, and they've come up with these kind of crazy names. Glicked or Wikiator. I like Wikiator. I think that's quite fun. But it hasn't performed quite as well as expected. 60 million domestic bow. The Sword and Sandals sequel has been playing overseas since last week, however, has now passed 131 million across 63 international markets for an estimated global haul of $200 million. Will this movie be profitable? I think Gladiator 2 will be profitable. I don't think it's going to make gangbuster numbers at the box office, but I do think it will be profitable ultimately. Will they go on to make a Gladiator 3 or some other type of spin-off if it's successful? There's a possibility there, but then again, maybe they don't want to dilute the IP too much. But I do think it will be successful ultimately, but we'll have to wait and see how successful it's going to be. So Wicked tells the story of how a shy green-skinned woman named Elphaba becomes a crackling villain with an aversion to water we first met in The Wizard of Oz. Cynthia Erivo stars as Elphaba, who will ultimately become the Wicked Witch of the West, while pop megastar Ariana Grande will play Glinda, aka the Good Witch of the East. So that's pretty much where we are there, guys. I mean, obviously we've got the synopsis of the movie here for Wicked. I'm not going to bore you and read all of that. Have a pause and read that if you feel like you want to at your own leisure. Also, we have the cast and the crew here. Again, pause and read that if at your own leisure if you want to, guys, if you're interested in learning who's in the Wicked movie with the cast here. Wicked is the first chapter of a two-part immersive cultural celebration. Wicked Part 2 is scheduled to arrive in theaters on November 26th, 2025. The question that I have, if this movie succeeds and generates a whole lot of box office revenue, are we going to see more Broadway musicals then being adapted into Hollywood movies? That could be the next big craze. You know, if a lot of musical directors start seeing that their Broadway shows are being turned into Hollywood movies and that it's generating money, it could be the next fad in Hollywood, the next craze. It could be the next thing that gets a big hype and push with all these Broadway musicals being turned into Hollywood movies. We'll have to wait and see if that takes off. But ultimately, it could come down to whether this movie is going to be successful. Talking about Wicked, obviously. But I think there's a high likelihood that it reaches that $1 billion elusive club. That only 55 movies in the whole of Hollywood history, thousands and thousands of movies that get made every year, and only 55 have ever made that $1 billion club. That just goes to show you just how hard it is to get into that $1 billion club. And $1 billion, we can't even comprehend in the human mind just how much money that is, which is kind of crazy. We talk about these figures of $1 billion here and $1 billion there, but when you actually think of how much money that is, it's truly mind-boggling. But this movie, it seems to be good. You guys have recommended it to me. I've heard great things about it. I'm not the demographic, but I'm going to leave my preconceived notions at the door when I go and watch this movie, and I'm hoping that I come out having a really, really great time watching it. But guys, that's the breakdown of the box office for the opening weekends of both Wicked and Gladiator 2. Have you seen either or both of these movies, and what did you think of them? I would love to hear your thoughts and your comments, not just on what you thought about the movies, but also what you think about the global box office opening weekends for these movies, and just in general, if you have any other thoughts, comments, or opinions. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe as always, and I will see you in the next video.